Hey, what's going on, guys? Nothing much to talk about today except for I made a illustration that I thought I would share the process of. I'm not really used to this yet, recording myself, but I want to get in the habit. So I don't have a ton of commentary to do at this moment, other than to say that I've sped up the process up to 4 times speed, normal speed, and I'll try to do some commentary, but I don't know how interesting it'll be. So if you want to mute me and put on some music, that's totally acceptable. The only thing I would say is ahead of time, I'm trying to make a push for Patreon again. So if you guys like what I do here or in general, if you want to support me in my channel or whatever, consider giving a buck. Yeah, and also I've got a book called Bad Dreams coming out. It is releasing first on Patreon, so if you want to read it as it's being made, you can give $1 a month and you can see stuff like this and all the new pages. You can read them for free, in air quotes. And also for like $3 a month, you can get the director's commentary and like hear about all my processes and sort of get behind the scenes of all the pages as I draw them. So the inspiration for this piece here is the obvious. I don't even think I can say it on YouTube, so I'm not going to say her name. But a lady who has nefarious intent, perhaps, and she's holding a roll of toilet paper as if to say, "Oh, if you want this, you're going to have to interact with me. So to get the very thing that you need, you have to catch the virus, right?" Oh, did I just say the V word? Oh dear. Yeah, so I start with an underdrawing here, and the thinking behind it is that sometimes there's something called blocking that I guess people do in the art world or in the painting world. You make shapes instead of lines. But because I come from a cartooning background and a comics background, I generally I can't seem to do very well if I'm working with shapes. So I think a good underdrawing with good line work helps me a lot more in the long run. It's sort of like creating a map and then traveling. So I love the part that I enjoy doing the most is like the brush strokes, but I can't get to the brush stroke step until I have a nice strong underdrawing. So in this case, I had a pose in mind, and the idea now is to sort of get the silhouettes and the shapes and the lines to a place where once I start painting, I will have a clean map to work with. So right now I'm sort of looking for the shapes before I'll start putting down what's called flats, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So right now I've figured out the form, the pose. We're going for a little sort of Alphonse Mucha-ish, glow around the head kind of thing. Her hair didn't quite work for me. I still don't know if I did the right haircut in the end, but right now, like, we're sort of looking for the in air quotes the essence of the character, and we got a different haircut here. And now I'm doing what's called a flats layer. So I'm putting a multiply layer on top of my line art. And we're putting down flat colors using the pencil tool. And the reason I do the pencil tool is because I don't want any anti-aliased pixels on the edges of my selections, so that when I start changing colors around, it won't create any artifacts on the edges. So I always do my flats with the pencil tool. And I actually try to use the pencil tool as much as I can, because I consider that easier to come back from and to revise if I change my mind. Once I start doing things like blending and changing colors around and gradients, then it becomes harder to change colors. It's still possible, but it's a little less convenient. So right now I'm just blocking in, looking for different shapes that I think would be interesting. If you look at the before and after, I still don't know what the final piece is going to look like. I'm just sort of putting the character down, putting down a few colors, and trying to see what the final piece might look like. And then we're skipping ahead a little bit. I selected a few colors, and now I'm doing Once I select the colors, that's when it's okay to do things like shading. So now I'm adding shading to her face, let's say. Decided it would, we're going for a slightly sinister vibe. So it'd be fun to, hang on, I just got to see something here. Okay. Yeah, I decided to put the lighting above her. It just felt right. You could also put the lighting beneath a character to make them look sinister, but it's a bit overdone. And of course, the actual cell looks like that. So what I wanted to do was not just have her in front of a cell. It's sort of like the cell is illuminating her like a halo. So I wanted it to look sinister, but also Muka-ish, beautiful, kind of. And I couldn't decide until the last minute if that was wings or her hair or something like that, and it just turned into a funny shape. And so a lot of people talk about my color choices in a complementary way. And incidentally, these are what are called complementary colors. You get green and red. You pick one color to stand out and one color to recede. According to color theory, that's sort of the most elementary way to create contrast. And so you can see, like, if you rewind a few minutes, her dress was kind of dull, and now it's very saturated. That's because I've decided I want the dress to pop, I want it to be noticeable. And only once I've decided on those colors do I actually go in and start shading, because if I change my mind later, basically it's more of a pain in the butt. And I'm juggling a bunch of different layers, but generally I only work with 2 layers. One for the pencil or line work, and one for the color. And then once I establish and am satisfied with all my colors, I go in there and flatten everything. And I just work with one flat layer. And that's kind of a very risky way to paint, but I come from a background of actually painting on canvas. That's how I learned how to actually apply color to things. So I try to think of these canvases as a physical canvas. Adding a few highlights here, help the head pop a little more. I'm still sort of looking for things like her expression. It's not quite there yet. But adding shadows underneath the head helps the head pop. So what you're looking for with both color theory and things like value is contrast. Because if you surround black, if you have a black dot, you surround it with white. And if you have a white dot, you surround it with black. And that's, the basic idea is you surround a thing that you want to pop with something that looks like it's receding. So in this case, you can see I'm sort of playing around with my different blending options. I don't blend colors until I've really decided, like, this is the color I want to use here. I try to use the pencil tool as much as possible. But since it seems at this stage I've become satisfied, I am now getting in there and starting to blend colors. And what's cool here is only recently I started putting red in the eyes and stuff like that. And that helps them look more natural, but also, again, this sinister theme. Putting a little bit of red in the eyes, I find, sort of makes a character look, I don't know, more intense, right? So this is obviously not a friendly character. So just got a little bit of red in the eyes, and it's like, don't come too close. Unless you really want that toilet paper. But in that case, I would say use a bidet instead. Stay away from this lady. And now I'm using just a basic round brush. I don't use any complicated brushes or anything like that. I'm still not, I don't know. I like doing individual strokes. So yeah, basic round brush with pressure sensitivity, nothing special. Throwing on a highlight here and there to help the silhouette pop a little more. And you can see now, if you compare this with the final image, it's sort of starting to come together. At this stage, anything I would do to a piece is just, I guess, icing on the cake. So the hardest part is actually deciding on colors. Once you decide on colors, I think the rest is sort of fun. You can listen to music and kind of turn your brain off. And you might notice that I'm mirroring the image. You go to image adjustments, something like that, and you can rotate the image and mirror it. And that's a trick that I picked up from back in the day, where if you're drawing and you hold up a picture to the light, you can see all these little mistakes that you've made. Basically, reversing or mirroring an image, that's something that you want to do all the time. There's no piece that I work on that I don't do that trick with. You want to try to look at a piece with fresh eyes as often as possible, because if you're staring at it for too long, you can't see things that you want to fix. And this pattern here is just gibberish. I find that it's a lot more fun to do things that feel right than things that actually look right. Under scrutiny, it's like with Impressionism. If you actually look at all the brush strokes, it's mostly nonsense. But this is fun. I liked doing this pattern, and I add further flourishes to it later. I tried to make a mirror effect. It doesn't matter, though. I just think this is fun. It really adds a lot of life to the character that wasn't there before. If you just have a plain dress, like I'm a man, right? Allegedly. So I don't have as much of a fashion sense as like a lady would, technically speaking. So things like patterns are still relatively new to me. I have to study things like fashion better. But adding patterns, I think, to my simple mind is one way to make a dress or a piece of clothing seem more complex than it actually is. And, famously, Tetsuya Nomura just adds belts, right? And chains. So it looks like one of the ways that I cover my butt here is to add patterns. I think it worked out anyways. You'll see that I changed the color. Right now I'm just putting down a flat pencil line. I'm going to change the colors around in a little bit. But I'm sort of creating a tattoo on a new layer. And you'll see in a little bit how I changed the colors around. And I think it turned out way better than what you're seeing here. And I'm still not worried about the colors necessarily, because I could always change those around. It's the actual form and the shape that I'm interested in right now. So I'll lock the transparency here, and then I take another color, in this case a green, but I could always change that around. And I'm putting the green wherever there is shadow, so that you see highlights only where light touches, and then basically I'm looking for a contrast. I want people to intuitively notice where there's shadow and where there's light, but also keep the pattern at the same time. So adding white was a very nice touch that happened by accident, but I like how that turned out. I don't know very much about shoes, so these don't really look that great. Unrelated to this, well, it's not unrelated. I was thinking of, how Alphonse Mucha does different pinups, if you will, for the seasons. So I thought it'd be funny, in an emo way, I guess, is to do characters based on diseases. So maybe if this works out and people like it, I'll do Ebola-chan or something. With like a bloody nose or something. Even though that's not what happens to people that get that. So still, I don't think the piece is necessarily successful yet, but putting down the right colors is probably the most important part, like with Impressionism. Just getting the right colors down is 90% of a successful painting, I feel like. And the rest of the details are just like little flourishes. Because at this point I could have technically stopped working on it. Well, not really, but close. You bring a piece up to like 90%, and then you can stop working on it. In a comic especially, you can declare it successful, and it won't matter most of the time. But here's the flourish that I added. That took a lot of time, but it was very effective, I think. I added a sort of bevel, is it, to the pattern. So just basically put a shadow underneath all of the little details there, just to help them pop. So again, contrast and popping is you put light underneath or above a shadow or vice versa to help things stand out, create a 3D effect. And by no means am I any master of this. I just, it seems to work for me. And her legs seemed a little dull, so now I start adding some color to it. And a lot of these paintings are sort of monochromatic. Like you can see her dress is pretty much all red. I'm not dealing with the green right now because the green recedes. I'm dealing with warm colors. And because my training is a lot of black and white, like on the book I'm working on now called Bad Dreams that I'll tell you about in a minute, I'm just basically going from light to dark, back and forth, making things stand out, making things recede, deciding what needs to be highlighted, what needs to support the things that are highlighted. Fundamentally, I think before working in color, it's been very useful for me to work in black and white because I can understand how to make things. Like what you're really doing in a painting is guiding the reader's eye. I mean, you're creating a piece that you will try to please people's eyes, but ultimately you're saying, okay, look at this and don't look at this. Especially in a comic panel. So at this point, I guess I've decided that she's sitting on her hair instead of wings. But whatever you want, man. There's some wingish shapes over there. There are a couple of flourishes at the very end that are very easy to do, but they help make the piece look very finished. But if it wasn't for all this setup, I don't think the piece would have been nearly as pleasing. So now just a little bit of cleanup. This is where I blend out my strokes to make it look a little more, a little cleaner. Because you don't want the strokes. A stroke, a line is distracting. And you want, if I decide, I want the focus of this piece to be the figure, not the strokes on the edges of the panel, or the composition itself, not the panel. But so now it's just clean up at this point. I've pretty much decided I'm finished with the piece. And I'm just hunting down extra pixels that snag the eye like a little trap. Anything that would distract people. Just looking for anything to clean up. I think I've almost decided that I'm almost finished. Looking for any last places where I can make things either recede or stand out just a little more. Shadow and light again. Simple multiply layer. Yeah, now the piece really is working, I think. But if it wasn't for all that setup, I don't think we would have gotten to this stage. So that's the importance of a good, solid line drawing underneath it all. And now I'm just cooling down some of the edges to help draw the eye to the center, to where the figure is. And again, green is the complement of red, so we're using a green just to sort of be the opposite of red, in the same way that black is the opposite of white. Couple of little flourishes, and then finally the actual cell itself. I wanted to make it look more like a halo, so it's just been sitting there, but I want to add a glow effect now. So instead of doing a selection this boring way, I'm just going to create a new layer, outline her, black, and then do a reverse selection. Then we'll add a light effect to help the cell pop a little more. That was effective a second ago to see her face in shadow. I could have left it like that, but it wasn't necessary. Then a couple little flourishes, because who cares? But it helps it look, little circles, say, there's cells around. And then finally at the very end, do color balance, levels, play around with a couple extra little colors just to make sure you're satisfied. And then just to clean up her silhouette, I'll add a glow effect and a little bit of shadow on her hair to stand out against the light behind her. Could have added it to her face, but I don't think that would have, I don't know. It's an option. It doesn't have to be that way. But that's it, basically. Little signature. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at that name, at gprime85. But yeah, that's it. That's the piece. I think it turned out really good. It took about 3 hours. I can't remember. The footage was sped up to 4 times. If you liked this, I fully encourage you guys to share it around. I'm going to share some images right now of my upcoming book, Bad Dreams, which I'm working on page by page. Basically, we're all stuck at home, right? So you can watch me draw it in real time, basically. I'm adding a new page or 2 new pages every 2 days. The idea is to release it all by April. Links are below in the description. Again, you can support this channel through Patreon and follow me on Twitter. And if you guys have any questions or requests for next time, maybe I'll do one of these illustrations every week or so. Let me know. All right, see you guys next time. Thanks.